Okay, let's look at the second example together. It says you try. Graph the function f of x equals negative 1/2 x squared plus 2x minus 1. So let's go ahead and fill in what we know in the box. We know a. A is always what is in front of the x squared or the quadratic term. So a is negative 1/2. B is 2, and C is negative 1. The parabola is based on A. Since A is negative, it opens down. The parabola, if it's opening down, means it has a maximum. If you have forgotten that, let's scroll back up, because you can go back and look right here. When A was positive, the graph opens up. I'm going to highlight that. When A is negative, the graph opens down. So all you're doing is looking at that A value to determine if it opens up or down. Then to know if it's a minimum or maximum, when it opens up, it's a minimum. When it opens down, it's a maximum. Okay, so let's go back just so you remember where to find that information. The axis of symmetry, we find the axis of symmetry by doing negative b over 2a. So I'm going to do this right here, negative b over 2a. When I do this, I'm doing the opposite of b. B is 2, so that's negative 2, over 2 times negative 1/2. So I have negative 2 divided by 2 times negative 1/2. Well, half of 2 is 1, so this is going to be negative 2 over negative 1. And negative 2 over negative 1 equals a positive 2. So I'm going to put 2. X equals 2. Remember, this is an equation. X equals 2. The vertex. We get the vertex by taking 2. We're going to take 2, and we're going to plug it in everywhere there is an x. So I'm going to rewrite this function as the f, not of x, but the f of 2 equals negative 1/2 times 2 squared plus 2 times 2 minus 1. I have to square 2 before I take half of that. So this is going to be negative 1/2 times 4, 2 squared is 4, plus 2 times 2 is 4, minus 1, equals, what is half of 4? Half of 4 is 2, so a negative 1/2 of 4 would be negative 2 plus 4 minus 1. Okay, so we got negative 2 plus 4 is 2, and 2 minus 1 is 1. Okay. So this is now our vertex. Our vertex is our axis of symmetry for our x, and it's 1, which is what we got when we plugged in the axis of symmetry into the x value. So it's 2, 1. The y-intercept is always 0c. C is negative 1. We figure out our last point after we graph this. So we're ready to graph. We start with our axis of symmetry to graph. I'm going to write this down. Start with axis of symmetry, A of S, that's what I call it. Graph as a dotted line. Vertical line. Okay. So our axis of symmetry is x equals 2. I'm going to get my ruler. And I make a dotted line. This is x equals 2. You can label it at the top or the bottom. X equals 2. Okay. That means my parabola is going to be symmetric on both sides of that dotted line. From there, it says it's opening down, so that means my vertex, which is 2, 1, going over 2 to the right and up 1, that's going to be the highest point of my parabola, the highest point. Then I go to my intercept, that's 0 on the x, negative 1 on the y. So then, to get your other point, what is the distance from the axis of symmetry, the pink line, to the blue line? You're going 2 spaces over. 2 spaces over, look, 1, 2. So that means to make the point symmetric to that, I'm going 2 spaces over this way and making a point. So now I have 3 points, and I can draw my parabola. Make that a little bit better. That's really bad. All right. Like that. Now, let's label everything. We have our vertex right here. That's 2, 1. We have our intercept. That's 0, negative 1. And now we created our point. What is that point? It's 4, 1. 4, 1, 4, negative 1, not 1, 4, negative 1. Make sure you make that negative. And you have graphed using a, a function in standard form using the information from that box. So to graph, we started with the axis of symmetry as a dotted line. Next, plot your vertex. Plot the vertex and then the y-intercept. And then finally, you find your last point by going the opposite direction from the axis of symmetry. So that's all I want you to do for today's notes. Once you feel comfortable with this, there are some problems posted for you to do. If you have access to a printer, it's going to be easier for you to print out the handout or the homework and do it because you will be submitting it online to me when it is done.